It had been 3 months since my mom, Angel, passed away, but some mornings I still woke up expecting to hear her voice drifting from the kitchen, humming some old hymn under her breath. Grief is funny like that. It doesn't move in straight lines. It circles you, hides in the corners of your mind, waits for you to drop your guard. Some days, it still crushed me, just like it did the morning we lost her. My name is Rebecca. I'm 27 years old. A painter who barely scrapes by with small commissions and custom pet portraits. I've never been the type to demand attention. And maybe that's part of the reason I always felt like I lived in the background of my own family. Especially when it came to my sister, Margaret. Margaret always took center stage without even trying. The golden child with the polished smile. The Instagram perfect life. The husband with the flashy car. The house big enough to make visitors whisper in awe. Mom adored her, defended her, made excuses for her no matter what. Meanwhile, I was the one who made sure the details didn't fall apart. I kept the bills paid when Margaret forgot. I made the appointments, drove Mom to her checkups, handled the things no one ever seemed to notice. The quiet work, the thankless work. I never asked for a parade. But sometimes, just once, it would have been nice if someone looked at me the way they looked at her. The last few months of Mom's life were the hardest. She started feeling sick, tired all the time, losing weight without trying. Margaret suggested she move into the guest house on her property. Not her actual house, of course. Just the small one-bedroom cottage out back that had been collecting dust for years. She's lucky to have me, Margaret said one afternoon, leaning against the doorframe while I packed up Mom's belongings. Her tone was light, but underneath it was that sharpness she always reserved for me. I clenched my jaw, forcing my hands to stay steady. She's not a stray cat, Margaret. She's our mother. Margaret just shrugged. She's getting a whole house to herself. Rent's cheap. I don't see the problem. The way she said it made me want to scream. Mom wasn't getting a favor. She was paying rent on a building Margaret hadn't even cared about until now. But Margaret would spin it, like she always did, and somehow she'd end up the saint. That night, after the last box was unpacked, Mom and I sat together in the tiny living room of her new home. She smiled at me over a cup of tea, her face pale but full of warmth. "Thank you for doing all this, sweetheart," she said, her voice thin but sincere. I reached across the small coffee table and squeezed her hand gently. "Anything for you, Mom." And I meant it. A week later, the twist came, the kind that shifts your entire world off its axis. We were at the clinic, waiting for the results. Mom fidgeted with the sleeve of her sweater, her hands thinner than I remembered. I tried to stay calm, tried to smile and tell her everything would be fine. But deep down, something cold and heavy was already settling into my bones. The doctor entered with a clipboard clutched to his chest, his face too carefully blank. It was lymphoma, 6 months to a year. If we were lucky. The world tilted sideways. I gripped the edge of my chair, nodding numbly as the doctor talked about treatment options, palliative care, timelines. It all blurred together, words tumbling over each other like a cruel avalanche. After the appointment, I sat in my car in the parking lot for a long time, staring out at nothing. Eventually, I dialed Margaret. "Margaret," I said when she answered, my voice shaking. "It's bad. It's lymphoma, stage 4. There was a pause, long enough that I thought maybe the call had dropped. "Well," Margaret said finally, her tone light, almost flippant, "that sucks. But at least she's got her little house now, right?" I closed my eyes, my hand tightening into a fist around the phone. "That's all you have to say?" I asked, my voice cracking. "She's dying, Margaret, dying. What do you want me to do?" "Rebecca," she snapped, "drop everything and be her private nurse? I have a life too. You know." I wanted to scream. Instead, I swallowed the anger burning in my throat. "You could start," I said, each word heavy and sharp, "by showing some basic compassion." There was a loud, exaggerated sigh on the other end. "Look, I'm doing what I can. Let's not make this about you, okay?" And just like that, the conversation ended. She hung up before I could say anything else. That night, sitting alone in the dark, the weight of everything crashed down on me. I knew, deep in my gut, that if Mom was going to have any peace in her final months, it was going to be because I made sure of it. Not Margaret, not anyone else. Just me. It was the first time I realized the full weight of what was coming. And somehow, deep down, I already knew this wasn't the last betrayal I would have to survive. The days after Mom's diagnosis blurred together into a strange rhythm of hospital visits, medications, and careful smiles that didn't quite reach our eyes. I became a regular fixture at her side, shuffling her to appointments, organizing her pills, cooking soft meals she could stomach. Margaret, as expected, kept her distance, dropping by once a week with a bright bouquet and a forced smile, staying just long enough to snap a photo for social media before breezing back out the door. Mom didn't complain. She never did. She just squeezed my hand a little tighter each time. Her skin cool and paper thin. Her eyes tired but endlessly grateful. She still tried to protect us both, even as her body betrayed her. Around that time, Mom decided she didn't want to worry about the little things anymore. She asked Margaret to help with her finances, paying bills, making sure insurance paperwork got filed, keeping track of her modest savings. It stung, sure, but Margaret was the organized one, the responsible one in their eyes. Always had been. I told myself to let it go. Mom deserved to feel safe, not burdened by family politics. Besides, I figured Margaret could handle it. How hard could it be to pay a few bills? One rainy afternoon, a few weeks later, I found Mom sitting on the worn couch in the guest house, fiddling nervously with her bracelet. "Rebecca," she said softly, "could you check my bank account for me?" I set down the laundry basket in my arms, frowning. "Of course, Mom. Everything okay?" She hesitated, then offered a tired smile. "I just want to be sure I have enough for groceries and prescriptions." I hate asking Margaret. She's so busy. Busy, right. I kissed her forehead and promised to handle it. After dinner, I headed to the bank, umbrella flipping in the sharp wind, trying to shake the growing unease in my gut. The teller was polite, printing off the account summary without hesitation. When she slid the paper across the counter, I felt the ground tilt beneath me. The balance was almost nothing. A few $100s where there should have been thousands. My hands shook as I flipped through the statement. One massive withdrawal, dated 2 weeks ago. The name on the electronic transaction blurred before my eyes. Margaret Bennett. I stepped outside into the freezing rain, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. I didn't even care that my hair was soaked, my coat plastered to my skin. My fingers fumbled with my phone as I called Margaret. She answered on the third ring, her voice bright and casual. "Hey, what's up, Margaret?" I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Why the hell did you empty Mom's account?" There was a beat of silence, just long enough to confirm everything I already feared. "Calm down," she said finally, her voice shifting into that defensive, dismissive tone she always used when she got caught. "It's not what you think." "Not what I think," I snapped. "You took everything, Margaret, everything, and your name is right there on the withdrawal." She sighed, like I was the one causing the problem. "It's a loan, Rebecca. God, don't be so dramatic. We needed some money for house repairs. It's not like Mom needs it right this second." I stood there in the rain, the icy drops sliding down my face, wondering how someone could be so hollow and not even realize it. "She's dying," I whispered, my voice raw, "and you stole from her." "I'm going to pay it back," Margaret said sharply. "You're making this a bigger deal than it is. Don't you dare go upsetting her over this." I felt something break inside me, something small but vital. "You have no idea what you've done," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "She's worried about affording groceries. Margaret, groceries, and you're out here stealing from her. Don't be a martyr," she snapped. "If you tell her, you'll just stress her out and make everything worse. You'll be the reason she's upset, not me." Her words hit like a slap. The sheer audacity of it left me gasping. Before I could respond, she hung up. The screen went dark in my hand, the dial tone buzzing faintly in my ears. I don't remember driving home. I don't remember peeling off my soaked clothes or curling up on the floor of my bedroom, shivering and hollow. I only remember the white-hot fury that burned under my skin, brighter and sharper than anything I had ever felt before. She thought she could get away with it. She thought she could spin the story, make me the villain, like she always did. But not this time. This time, I wasn't going to stay silent. Not for her. And the days that followed felt like a strange kind of hell. Every time I looked at Mom, smiling at me from her favorite chair with her thinning hair and her too pale skin, a fresh wave of rage boiled inside me. She trusted us. She trusted Margaret. And here I was, carrying the burden of a truth so heavy it threatened to crush me with every step. I couldn't tell her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Margaret knew that. She counted on it. She showed up the next day with a grocery bag and a cheap bouquet, flouncing into Mom's little house like she hadn't just stolen her life savings. I watched from the kitchen as she kissed Mom's forehead and chattered about a new brunch spot she and George had tried. Mom beamed up at her like a sunflower toward the sun, soaking in the rare attention. It made me sick. Later, when Mom napped, Margaret cornered me outside on the porch, her arms crossed tight over her chest. "You're not seriously still mad, are you?" she said, her voice low and sharp. I stared at her, disbelief knotting my stomach. "You stole from her." She rolled her eyes like I was a petulant child. "It's temporary." God, Rebecca, grow up. George and I had an emergency. We needed to replace the roof. You think Mom would rather we be homeless? I could hardly breathe through the rage tightening in my chest. "You could have asked," I said, my voice trembling. "She would have helped. She would have given you anything. And instead, you took it behind her back." Margaret shrugged, completely unbothered. "It's all the same in the end. She's not going to live long enough to miss it." The words hit me like a physical blow. For a moment, I couldn't see, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but try to hold myself upright. "You disgust me," I whispered. She smiled, slow and smug. "Tell her if you want. But you'll just be the reason she spends her last months heartbroken." With that, she turned and sauntered back inside, leaving me shaking with fury on the porch. I knew then, crystal clear, that Margaret wasn't going to stop. She wasn't sorry. She wasn't even scared. And if I stayed silent, she would keep draining whatever was left, Mom's savings, Mom's spirit, Mom's dignity. The twist came sooner than I expected. 3 days later, I stopped by to bring groceries. As I parked in front of the guest house, I spotted Margaret and George across the street, stepping out of one of the town's fanciest boutiques. Margaret laughed, tossing her hair over her shoulder as she juggled several glossy shopping bags. George carried more, their arms weighed down with luxury. I froze. For a second, I thought maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. Maybe they were just window shopping. But then Margaret pulled out her wallet, flashing a credit card with a flourish as she handed it to the cashier waiting by the door. I sat there in my car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. They were spending it, spending Mom's money, on designer clothes and overpriced nonsense, while Mom carefully measured out her prescriptions to make them last longer. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I got out of my car and marched straight across the street. "Margaret," I called, my voice slicing through the crisp autumn air. She turned, her smile faltering when she saw me. "Rebecca," she said, her tone syrupy sweet. "Fake as ever. Out running errands?" I ignored the jab, my eyes locked on the bags swinging from her hands. "Out spending Mom's money, you mean?" George stiffened beside her, his face hardening. "Don't cause a scene," he muttered under his breath. Margaret's smile froze in place. "You're being dramatic," she said, lowering her voice. "This isn't what it looks like." "No?" I said, stepping closer. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly like two parasites living off a dying woman's savings." Gasps from the boutique workers floated around us. But I didn't care. Margaret's cheeks flushed a deep, angry red. "You don't know anything," she snapped. "Mom wanted us to have nice things. She told me so." "You're lying," I said, my voice shaking. "And you know it." George stepped between us, his jaw tight. "Back off, Rebecca," he said. "You're embarrassing yourself." I stared at them, really stared, and saw it clearly for the first time. The desperation behind Margaret's carefully curated facade. The fear crackling under George's bluster. They weren't invincible. They were crumbling. Good. Without another word, I turned and walked away, my heart hammering in my chest. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do yet. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to stay silent anymore. Not for them. Not for anyone. OT for anyone. The fallout from that day outside the boutique didn't come immediately. Margaret was smart enough not to confront me again in public. She slipped back into her polished little life, pretending everything was fine, but I could feel the tension crackling every time we crossed paths. It was like an invisible wire stretched between us, taut and trembling, waiting for the slightest pressure to snap. Meanwhile, Mom's health declined faster than any of us were ready for. She slept more, ate less, her once bright eyes growing dimmer with each passing day. I tried to shield her from the worst of it. I kept her comfortable, read to her when she was too tired to hold a book. Painted small watercolors to hang around her room, tiny splashes of color against the creeping gray. And I stayed silent about Margaret. Every time I opened my mouth to tell her, the words withered on my tongue. She deserved peace. She deserved better than betrayal and bitterness in her final months. So I carried the burden alone, even as it ate away at me from the inside out. One Saturday afternoon, Laura convinced me to take a break. "You're burning yourself out, Rebecca," she said gently, placing a hand on my shoulder. "You can't pour from an empty cup. Just a few hours. Go to that yoga class you love. Clear your head. I'll stay with your mom if you're worried." I hesitated, guilt gnawing at me, but Mom herself insisted. "You need to take care of yourself too, sweetheart," she said, her hand squeezing mine with what little strength she had left. "I'll be fine for a few hours." So I went. I left my phone in my bag, silenced and tucked away, telling myself it would only be for a little while. For the first time in months, I let myself breathe. I moved through the poses, focusing on the stretch of muscle, the pull of breath, the quiet inside my mind. I thought maybe, just maybe, I was starting to feel human again. When class ended, I pulled out my phone. 6 missed calls, all from Margaret. My stomach twisted into a knot as I fumbled to listen to the last voicemail. "Rebecca, it's Mom." Her voice cracked, trembling and raw. "She's gone. I don't know where you were, but you should have been here. I don't remember driving home. I don't remember how I got through the front door. I only remember the sight of Margaret sitting on the couch, her face blotchy and red, her hands trembling in her lap. She just stopped breathing," she said, looking up at me with wide, tear-filled eyes. I was here. I tried, but there was nothing I could do. The world tilted, blurred around the edges. I stumbled down the hallway, to the little bedroom where Mom had spent her last months. She lay there, peaceful, a faint smile still lingering on her lips. The ache that cracked open inside me was so deep, so devastating, I thought it might tear me apart. I knelt by her side, pressing my forehead against the cool skin of her hand, and sobbed until I couldn't breathe. Behind me, Margaret's voice cut through the haze like a knife. "You should have been here," she said, her voice sharp and cold. "She needed you, but you were off doing God knows what. Yoga, probably." I turned to look at her, stunned by the cruelty in her words. "You don't get to say that," I whispered, my voice shaking with rage and grief. "Not after everything you've done." She lifted her chin defiantly. But I could see it, the crack in her facade, the flicker of fear. "You abandoned her," she spat. "You think you're the hero. But you weren't even here when it mattered." The unfairness of it, the sheer audacity, made my vision blur with fresh tears. But I said nothing. Not yet. There would be a time for truths. And that time was coming. The funeral was a cold, gray day, the sky hanging low and heavy over the little church Mom had loved. I sat near the front, clutching a photo of her in my hands, feeling hollow and numb and angry all at once. Margaret and George arrived late, sweeping into the church with an air of forced solemnity. Margaret wore a sleek black dress, a string of pearls around her neck that caught the light as she moved. George's arm was around her waist, steadying her as if she were the one who needed support. I caught the whispers almost immediately. Rebecca wasn't there when Angel died. Margaret said she was off at yoga or something. Poor Margaret. She's been so strong. Each murmur landed like a slap across my face, raw and stinging. Margaret had made sure to plant the seed. She wanted them to see me as the selfish daughter, the absent one, the disappointment, and judging by the looks burning into the back of my head. It had worked. Margaret slid into the pew beside me, her perfume cloying and sweet. "You okay?" she whispered, her voice dripping with fake concern. I stared straight ahead, refusing to look at her. Because I knew something she didn't. Something she couldn't twist or spin or smear into another lie. Mom had left behind more than just memories. She had left behind the truth. And it was about to tear everything apart. The priest's voice was calm as he stepped up to the pulpit. A small sealed envelope in his hand. The church fell into a hush so deep. I could hear the old wooden pews creaking as people shifted in their seats, craning their necks to see what he was holding. This letter, he said, his voice steady, was given to me by Angel just days before she passed. She asked me to read it aloud today. It was her final wish. I felt the breath catch painfully in my throat. Margaret stiffened beside me, her posture going rigid. I could feel her tension radiating off her like heat. The priest carefully opened the envelope, unfolding the paper inside with the kind of reverence reserved for sacred things. To all who have gathered here today, he began, thank you for coming to celebrate my life. His voice was gentle, warm, just like Mom's had always been. I leave this world filled with love and gratitude, he read, but I also leave with a heavy heart. Because there are truths I can no longer carry with me into the next life. Margaret shifted again, a sharp intake of breath hissing between her teeth. In my final months, the priest continued, I experienced a betrayal that cut deeper than any illness ever could. Margaret, my eldest daughter, you were entrusted with my care, my home, and my finances. I believed in you, I trusted you, but you used that trust to enrich yourself at my expense. A stunned gasp rippled through the congregation. Margaret's face went pale, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly like a fish gasping for air. You emptied my bank account. The priest read on, his voice unwavering. Money that was meant to care for me in my final days. Money that Rebecca worked so hard to protect. Even when she knew the truth. Rebecca, my sweet girl, I saw everything you did for me. I knew, and I am proud of you. I pressed my hand against my mouth, tears streaming down my cheeks, hot and uncontrollable. Mom knew. She had known all along. And she loved me anyway. The priest folded the letter slowly, placing it back into the envelope with shaking hands. The silence that followed was thick and suffocating. All eyes turned to Margaret. She bolted to her feet, her chair screeching loudly against the polished floor. This is outrageous, she snapped, her voice high and brittle. She was sick. She didn't know what she was saying. No one spoke. No one moved. Even George looked like he wanted to crawl under the nearest pew. You don't understand, Margaret cried, turning in a slow circle, seeking someone, anyone, to back her up. I did everything for her. I was there. The words echoed hollowly against the stone walls of the church. Finally, Laura stepped forward, her voice cutting clean through the heavy air. No, Margaret, she said quietly. Rebecca was there. We all know it. A low murmur of agreement spread through the pews. Margaret looked around, wild-eyed, her hands trembling. You all think you know everything. She spat. You think you're so perfect. You weren't there. You didn't see how hard it was. Hard for who? I asked softly, rising to my feet. My voice was clear, calm, but it carried through the church like a bell. Hard for you, Margaret? Or hard for Mom, who had to spend her last months worrying if she could afford her medication because her own daughter stole from her? Margaret's face crumpled, twisted with rage and humiliation. You'll regret this, she hissed at me. But even as she said it, she knew the truth. She had already lost. Without another word, Margaret stormed out of the church, George scurrying behind her like a shadow. The heavy doors slammed shut behind them with a final, resounding thud. And just like that, the tension broke. People began moving again, some coming toward me with soft words of comfort, others exchanging glances filled with pity and anger. But I barely noticed any of it. I was too focused on the letter still clutched in the priest's hand. Mom had seen everything. Mom had known. And even when I doubted myself, even when I questioned my worth, she had believed in me. Later that night, after the last casserole had been dropped off, the last awkward hug given, I sat alone in my apartment, the letter resting in my lap. I ran my fingers over Mom's familiar handwriting, letting the finality of her words sink deep into my bones. For the first time in a long, long time, I felt a strange, beautiful kind of peace. I wasn't the background character anymore. I wasn't the forgotten daughter. I wasn't invisible. I had been seen. I had been loved. I had been enough. And Margaret? Margaret would have to live with the truth of who she really was. That was her burden now. Not mine. I folded the letter carefully, pressing it against my heart for a moment before tucking it away. Tomorrow, the world would keep turning. Bills would need paying. Paintings would need finishing. Life would hum forward like it always did. But tonight, just for tonight, I let myself grieve and heal and hope. Because the love Mom left me with was bigger than the betrayal. And in the end, love always wins. Always.